Hello everyone, this is Donelle McAdams and I'm coming to you today from High Country Quilts in Colorado Springs, Colorado. And it's a beautiful place out here. The weather is gorgeous right now and I'm going to be teaching here this weekend. So I just decided I would do my quilt along right here from High Country Quilts, and we appreciate them letting us use one of their cutting tables to do our Facebook quilt along. So we are super excited to get going with this, and we are going to be working on this project today, and this is called a quilted caddy. And you can see there in the photo that we have put our tools in it. And what I did with this is, after I created it, I went ahead and then just put a mug, just like a ceramic coffee mug, in there. And that way you can put in some of your tools, some of your things that you use all the time, and then it can move with you from place to place. So I have placed here right on the front screen our tools that we're going to be using in our supplies, and we're going to go through that in just a minute, and you can see the caddy right there. But first of all, I'd like to tell you a little bit about how a quilt along works. This is our first session of 3, and we'll be seeing you the next 2 weeks at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, which, depending on where you live, that's a different time. I jokingly said I got the wrong time for today because I've been in 3 different time zones in the last 5 days and I wasn't sure where we were. So you'll have to make sure that you know what time it's supposed to be for you so that you don't miss anything. But I will tell you, this is all being recorded, so you will be able to look at these later and maybe slow them down, do whatever you want to do. We will be giving you a list of the supplies. You will have everything. If you haven't picked that up, you can go to Sew Steady's website and it's on there. So without further ado, let's get right on with it. We would first like to thank our sponsors, and if I started naming them, I would miss some of them. So each week we will be giving away product, and all of those sponsors have participated by giving us product for you to win. And so how do you do that? The way you do that is like, comment, and share often. You can put on there, this is my first quilt along, or where you're from, or whatever. You can repeat or not repeat, but you can repeat those likes, shares, and comments over and over. And we will be answering questions. So I have my daughter along with me today, and she's right here beside me, and she's going to be looking at your questions. So if you have a question, just go ahead and write it on there, and she will stop me and I'll answer the questions. So we are going to go through our supply list now. So if you got it ahead of time, you know what we're going to be needing. So first of all, with our fabrics here, I have 2 different fabrics. As you can see, you have a fabric here and a fabric here. And I really can't call this a lining because, as you can see, it comes out on the front side. So we're not necessarily going to call it a lining. We're going to call it a main fabric, and we're going to call it a secondary fabric. And you can decide which one you want to use there. So you would have had a 1/2 yard of your main fabric, which this is going to be my main, and I would have had a 1/2 yard of the secondary fabric. Now yesterday I was thinking you really don't have to have 2 of those 18-inch squares, because everything you see here is cut into an 18-inch square. You could use muslin, because one of these is not ever going to be seen on your main or on your secondary fabric. So if you wanted to, you would be able to get another one of these out of your fabric, because we all know we probably have some fabric, some muslin, something that we could use as the lining, because you can see, you can't see that anywhere in this project, but in order to quilt, we have to have that on there so it'll glide across our glider and our Sew Steady table. So that's a little bit of an option for you. I don't mean to confuse you on that, but what you would do is you would either have 2 fabrics, you can see this is 2 pieces of the main, or we would use one of those and one of the muslin. So this is going to make a fabric sandwich here. In just a minute we'll talk about that part of it. So I can use this, and my other piece that I have here is going to be ready for me to make another one later. So I can put that aside. I would be doing the same thing with this. Instead of using both of these, I would take that away and use another piece of the muslin. So I would have my main fabric and my secondary fabric, both of those ready to go with a muslin backing. And again, that would leave us with one of the main right here and one of the secondary, or one of the secondary and one of the main. Got that backwards there. Live TV, huh? So anyway, what we're going to do is make 2 fabric sandwiches. Now, if you've done any of the Westerly quilting, you know we do a lot with fabric sandwiches. So there's 2 options. You can either have 2 18-inch squares of fusible fleece. Now, many of you are familiar with this. On one side, it has a fusible. We wouldn't use this in a quilt, but a project like this, you can use that. So we would either have 2 layers of that fusible fleece, or my actual preference would be to use Quilter's Dream batting. And this is the one that I used. And you can see here that it was white. It's a craft bat, and the type is Request. Now, if you've never used Quilter's Dream batting, you're in for a treat. And of course you can use any, but this happens to be the one that I prefer. And we will be giving away some Quilter's Dream batting. But what I'm going to do is lay this down right on top, and again, it's an 18-inch square. And when I lay this out and smooth this out, as you can see down here, I'm going to pull this up on the screen. When I lift this up, I haven't sprayed it or anything. So when I lift that up, the first time after I did that, it just stays right there with us. So you could actually do this without any spray. I'm going to lay the other one on top, and right on top, because we're going to use all 18 inches of this. Do we have any questions anywhere along the line yet?
Not yet.
What about our audience here? Do you guys have any questions? They're all being so quiet. So I've got that all pressed together, and I could do this without any spray. But if you want to, I'm not actually going to spray this, but if you wanted to, you could spray here. And one of our sponsors is June Taylor, and she has a quilt basting spray, and I'm going to put a picture of it up there, and that's one of the sprays that you could use. When you're using this, you want to allow for overspray. So you would either put down, like get a vinyl cloth, like a tablecloth from the dollar store or something like that, and put that down, or better yet, I go outside to a picnic table, and I make sure I wear a mask when I'm doing this, even when I'm outside. So you can spray that. So I've got one ready to go, and that's my secondary fabric. And I'm going to lay that aside till next week. Boy, that's hard to wait till next week. I really want to just get started with this. And I need my other, here we go. I need my other piece of muslin and my Quilter's Dream. And again, these are all 18-inch squares. And I'm going to take my last of my main fabric and layer that all up. So the size of this would allow you to be able to do this without. Where can we find the spray is a question that has just come through. I would recommend calling your local quilt store and asking them for it, because they may not have it, but they may be willing to get it for you. It is a June Taylor product, and that's a very common company in the quilt world. So I have my second one. That's my main, all ready to go. And I have my secondary fabric. So you can see I'm ready to quilt with those 2 fabric sandwiches. Now, going back to supplies, we're going to need somewhere along the line, and I wanted to show you these this week because some people have wondered what I meant, because I think I listed fun buttons. So these are fun buttons. Obviously I have fun buttons here, and I'm going to use this next week when I put this one on because I want it to contrast with my buttons. Now you need 3 buttons, so somewhere between here and Marion, Indiana, there's another button. I've got to find it. So I had 3, but I don't know what's happened to them. So when we construct our project next week, we're going to be using a thread that is compatible, or we're actually going to construct it the 3rd week, I'm sorry. We're going to be using a thread that works in with our fabrics. But when we do our quilting next week, we want something that's going to show up. This is the thread that I'm going to use, that darker green. Because last time I used the yellow, and although it looks really nice, many of you probably are going to have to zoom in to be able to see that quilting. So you decide what you want. Some of you are saying, well, I'm pretty new to this. Maybe I'll use something that I can't see as well. And that's fine. It doesn't matter. But I'm going to recommend that you use something that contrasts on there.
We have a question from Beverly. She wants to know, if using primary and secondary fabrics together, would the secondary fabric be right side up, batting, then primary right side up?
When you put them together, they're going to make a sandwich. So it would be, this is my one, so this one, that's a great question. I see what she's saying. This, if I was using both of these for my sandwich, this would be right side out on both pieces. Great question. I hadn't thought of that when I did this. So in other words, what she wanted to know was, should this fabric sandwich, when it's made with the same fabric, be outside on each one? And yes, that is. So thanks, Beverly. We appreciate that question. So going back over that, you're going to need at least a 1/2 yard of 2 fabrics, and obviously that will now, as I showed you, make 2 of the quilted caddies. And then I used a 1/2 yard of muslin and cut that so then I can extend the use of what I'm doing. If you're going to make 2 complete caddies, you would need to get a 1/2 yard of your main fabric, a 1/2 yard of your secondary fabric, and then a full yard of your muslin. Or as I said, you could use something that's in your stash. Now I assume all of you know what stash is, but it's really funny when I get started with new quilters, they don't understand stash. Now, I imagine you guys here in my audience are kind of getting a little chuckle out of that, because stash is what we have when we have leftover fabric. So for now, I have a little piece of muslin in my stash. This is what was left over from cutting. So I have about 8-inch strip there that's 18 inches long, and I'm certainly not going to get rid of it. I'm going to fold it up nice and neat and put it in a box or a container or whatever of light colored, so that I can then have my stash that's somewhat organized. And that really is hard to do too, is organize your stash. So we've got our buttons, we've got our thread, we've got it layered up. You spray it if you want to, and now we're ready to make our pattern. So for this, you're going to need 4 sheets of copy paper or 4 sheets of craft paper or construction paper. And I just have my copy paper right here. And that's 4 sheets that are stacked up. Now some of you are saying she's going to cut that with a rotary cutter. Yes, I am, and I actually have a rotary cutter that I only use with paper. So you're going to want to mark one, or, you know, as you get an older blade, a blade that's old will still cut paper, so it makes it a lot easier. So I've layered up 4 sheets of paper. And I'm using the Westerly 60-degree equilateral triangle. I will not try to say that 4 times fast. But this one is one that goes from 6 inches to 12 inches. And I'm going to be cutting an 8 1/4. So I don't know how close we can get to see this here. I may need to put something dark behind it. So let me put a piece of this cardboard. That's much better. So we're going to be doing 8 1/4. So this will be a 60-degree equilateral triangle. So you can see where this is down here. It's down at 9 1/2. So I'm going to be taking a screwdriver and loosening this. Once you start using this Westerly cutting system, you're absolutely going to love it. Because I'm going to push this right up here to 8 1/4 and tighten that screw. Make sure I kept it straight and tighten the other one. Now on the back of this template, next week I'm going to be showing you the 24-inch one because it's just as cool as this. There's a ridge right here. So this has actually got depth to it. You can probably see it if I do it like that. There's an extra piece on the back. So now I line these back up. And I'm going to put this ruler right up to that edge. Are we all in the picture there? And I'm going to cut right beside my template. I told you it was a paper cutter. Well, a little bit. There we go. I've made confetti. Don't try this at home. I'm coming back on. There we go. Okay. Now we've got it. So it's live, girls. I can't just cut it out. I gotta use it. So there we go. We've got 4 triangles. They're all the same size, which is 8 1/4. So if I were to measure this, I'll set it right down here. It's going to come right down to that 8 1/4. So I'm going to take those triangles. Yep, she said she cut. My studio audience here is my help. I pushed it out of the way. All right. So don't make this part hard because I've seen people get really frustrated with this. But I've already cut myself some 2-inch pieces of just Scotch tape. You can use whatever you want. I'm going to line this up here. Get a piece of the tape and put that right on there. So I've got one on one side of this triangle. I'm going to rotate that and take another triangle. Remember, they're cut equilateral, so it doesn't matter what side. We are just making a larger triangle for our pattern.